the entire America's Got Talent arena in Phoenix, Arizona went silent the moment the poor boy stepped onto the stage, as if the whole building suddenly forgot how to breathe. From the far back rows to the edge of the judges' table, every pair of eyes locked onto him, not because he looked like a superstar, but because he looked like he had been fighting life from the very beginning. His old, faded shirt hung loosely on his thin frame, and his shoes were so worn out that the stitching along the sides was barely holding together. He kept his head down as he walked, his shoulders slightly hunched, the posture of someone who had learned to expect very little from the world. The bright stage lights hit him hard, making him squint as if he had never stood under such brightness before. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and run back into the shadows. The judges exchanged curious glances, not because they expected greatness, but because something about the boy's presence felt different, quiet, humble, heavy with stories untold. Even Cemon raised an eyebrow, sensing there was more beneath the surface. When the host asked him to introduce himself, his voice trembled, barely louder than a whisper. He explained he had come a long way, walking miles, because he didn't have money for transportation. A soft murmur spread through the audience. Some leaned forward, others folded their arms, unsure of what was coming next. Nobody knew what this poor kid, standing alone under the massive lights, was capable of. And truthfully, neither did he. When the music for Hotel California started, the boy closed his eyes tightly, gripping the microphone with both hands as if it were the only thing keeping him standing. The first note that came out was so unexpectedly pure, so painfully beautiful, that the room instantly shifted. People who had been skeptical just seconds before suddenly froze in disbelief. It wasn't just singing. It was the sound of heartbreak, struggle, and hope all tangled together in one raw, trembling voice. It echoed through the hall like a story written in sound. The judges sat up straighter. One placed a hand over their heart. Another wiped the corner of an eye before pretending it was nothing. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was a confession, one carved out of poverty, fight, and silent tears. As the boy continued, his voice grew stronger, fuller, carried by emotions he had probably never been able to express anywhere else. He wasn't singing Hotel California the way the Eagles sang it. He was breathing a new life into the song, shaped by nights spent dreaming in the dark corners of survival. Yet even as the audience erupted in cheers, the boy's reaction stayed humble, his chin trembling, his eyes glued to the floor, as if he couldn't believe thousands of strangers were clapping for him. In that powerful moment, everyone realized they weren't witnessing just another audition. They were watching a miracle rise right in front of them, a miracle born from nothing but heart, courage, and the voice of a poor boy who had finally been seen. The boy, who came from the quiet, struggling streets of Cleveland, Ohio, had already shared backstage that his life was far from ordinary. He talked softly, almost shyly, about how he lived near an old cemon Cowell, a place his family depended on every single day. It wasn't a well built for modern pipes or machinery. It was a cracked, weather-beaten hole in the ground surrounded by dry soil and the smell of livestock. His family used a rusty metal bucket tied with a fraying rope to pull water up, hoping each time that the well hadn't dried out. That was his everyday life, a world where survival meant hard work, long days, and hope that things might someday get better. For him, music wasn't a hobby or a luxury. It was the only escape from a life that had never offered him anything easy. So when he stepped onto the AGT stage, carrying the weight of his entire world in his voice, something extraordinary happened. As he reached the second verse of Hotel California, the audience felt a shift in the atmosphere, like the air had turned electric. His voice deepened with emotion, carrying a raw honesty that was impossible to ignore. Every note sounded like it had been shaped by long nights under dim light. Singing to himself, while the wind blew across the cemon Cowell behind his home. His tone cracked at just the right moments, not because he lacked skill, but because he was pouring real pain into the lyrics. It was the kind of emotion that can't be taught in any music class. It could only come from someone who had lived through struggle and turned that struggle into sound. The audience, one by one, stood up from their seats. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. People who didn't know this boy, who had never seen him before, suddenly felt connected to his story. Mothers held their hands to their hearts, teenagers recorded on their phones with wide eyes, and older men nodded softly as his voice pulled at memories they hadn't revisited in years. Even the toughest judge on the panel blinked rapidly, trying to hide tears that were threatening to fall. The boy wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't chasing fame. He sang like someone who had spent years whispering his dreams into empty rooms, afraid they might disappear before morning. And the boy's reaction made the moment even more powerful. When the audience erupted with cheers, he instinctively stepped back, placing a shaking hand on his chest. His eyes widened, not with pride, but with disbelief, like he couldn't understand why thousands of people were standing for him. He kept glancing toward the floor, his body curling inward in the posture of someone unaccustomed to praise. But that humility, that pure innocence, made his performance even more unforgettable. Right there in the heart of America, Hotel California wasn't just a song anymore. It became a lifeline, a message, a story told through the voice of a poor boy who had spent his life near a forgotten Cowell and somehow transformed all that hardship into music powerful enough to move an entire nation. When the boy delivered the final, trembling note, the entire AGT arena seemed to explode into a storm of applause that shook the walls. For a split second, there was absolute silence, like everyone's heart paused. Then the entire audience rose as one, cheering, shouting, whistling, and clapping with the kind of wild energy usually reserved for legends. The judges didn't exchange a single word. They didn't need to. Their expressions already said everything. Cemon leaned forward, eyes glistening slightly, and before the boy even had a chance to catch his breath, the golden buzzer slammed down with a force that echoed like thunder across the studio. The sound of it hitting the panel shot through the room like electricity. Instantly, golden confetti burst from above, cascading toward the stage in a sparkling waterfall. The boy from Dallas, Texas, who once stood barefoot near a cemon Cowell just to sing away his worries, now stood frozen beneath a shining storm he had never imagined being part of. His mouth fell open, trembling as he tried to breathe through the shock. His hands, still clutching the microphone, slowly rose toward his face, as if trying to shield himself from the overwhelming flood of emotion crashing into him. He looked like a child staring at magic for the very first time, unsure if it was real or if he was dreaming with his eyes open. The audience roared louder with every second. People wiped tears, hugged the strangers next to them, and pointed toward the stage with expressions that said, "We just witnessed history." The judges stood and clapped as the golden rain covered the stage floor. The boy's thin shoulders shook as tears finally escaped his eyes, tracing down his cheeks in uneven lines. He had never seen anything like this in his life. Hundreds of cameras flashing, thousands of hands clapping, millions watching from home, and all of it for him. A poor boy who had come from nothing. A boy who sang beside a cemon Cowell because he didn't have a proper room to practice in. A boy who had walked miles because he couldn't afford a bus ticket. Cemon Cowell slowly walked toward him, brushing confetti off his shoulders as he approached. The crowd quieted down in anticipation, wanting to hear what he would say. Simon placed a gentle hand on the boy's back, leaned into the microphone, and spoke in a calm but emotional voice. "This right here, this is why we do this show. You're not just a singer. You're a reminder that dreams survive even in the toughest places." The crowd erupted again. The boy nodded slowly, overwhelmed, clutching his chest as if trying to hold his heart in place. Every golden piece that landed around him seemed to mark the end of his struggle and the beginning of something new, something bigger than anything he had ever imagined. That day, Hotel California didn't just echo through the auditorium. It echoed across America, across living rooms, across hearts. And it carried with it the unforgettable story of a poor boy who stepped out of the shadows and into a moment nobody expected, one that would stay alive forever.